Western Mediterranean, Bronze Age cultures. Metalworking improved and promoted the progress of the Western Mediterranean lands, which developed maritime relations, joining them to one another and binding them to the Eastern Mediterranean. Several great centers displayed considerable architectural activity, of which some splendid evidence remains. Iberia. The Bronze Age was a brilliant stage of culture in the Iberian Peninsula and was designated El Argar, honoring the name of a great site of southeastern Spain. El Argar, which stood well fortified on a plateau about 1,000 feet long and about 330 feet wide, enjoyed from 1700 BC several centuries of prosperity and exerted an influence that spread over the eastern coasts of Spain and over southern Portugal. A necropolis of about 1,000 burials has yielded goods of quality from the graves. The El Argar culture had continuing contacts with the Balearic Isles, Malta, and Sardinia. Balearic Isles. In the Balearic Isles, the Bronze Age corresponds to the 2nd millennium BC and is designated Talavotic from the name of the Talayot, a megalithic monument in the form of a round or quadrangular tower. Majorca still has about 1,000 talayots, and Minorca has more than 300. These high numbers indicate the amplitude of construction activity, implying precise architectural planning and the coordination of the efforts of human groups. Their intended purpose varies. They may be defensive towers, places of worship, or funerary monuments. There are also other types of megalithic monuments in the Balearic Isles. For example, navitas, or collective tombs built in the form of ships, and Minorcan talas, composed of a monolithic column topped by a slab and today recognized as places of worship. This megalithic architecture, which is imposing in conception and skilled in execution, continued into the 1st millennium BC, the early Iron Age, and made the Balearic Isles an exceptional ground for the study of the structures of the pre-Roman era. Malta. Malta had experienced a magnificent flourishing of underground burial chambers, or hypogea, and megalithic temples in the Neolithic period. These Neolithic temples are among the first instances in Europe of buildings erected for a particular functional purpose. They have a trefoil plan and a roof construction of corbelled stone that is the earliest known example of its kind. The arrival of Cycladic and Cretan influences in Malta stimulated the birth of a stone and terracotta statuary representing the deities and their worshippers. This continued brilliantly in the Copper Age, but the beginning of the 2nd millennium witnessed the appearance of a new people who conquered and destroyed, which is well known from the cremation burial ground of Tarsian. Small terracotta female idols recall contemporary figurines of Cyprus, but the culture was rapidly impoverished. Sardinia and Corsica. It is necessary to go farther north, Sardinia and Corsica, to find an original and prosperous Bronze Age, the creations of which continue to pose certain problems of interpretation. The Sardinian bronze civilization is characterized by the nuraghi, round towers that may occur alone or form the center of complex, fortified arrangements. About 7,000 of them, dating from about 1500 to 1100 BC, have been discovered on different parts of the island. They are efficiently and skillfully constructed defensive fortresses, the interior arrangements of which give evidence of an art developed out of military architecture. Around the Naragi press the round huts of villagers, which are, in turn, surrounded by solid ramparts. The complex thus constitutes an architectural unity, which arose from a patriarchal society in which families fearfully gathered around their clan chief. There is a kind of rough beauty in these true fortified castles, with their compact and severe appearance. Tribal battles and the Phoenician conquest in the 7th century BC led to the decline and disappearance of the Nuragic civilization. On neighboring Corsica, fine megalithic structures such as dolmens and isolated or grouped menhirs were made during the Neolithic period. This megalithic architecture continued in the Copper Age and throughout the Bronze Age. Populated centers were provided with a fortified arrangement. Philitosa, for example, with its elliptical surrounding wall, its menhir statuary erected in a place of worship, and its defensive towers. Italy. From 1500 BC, there developed in Emilia, in northern Italy south of the Po River, the Mare culture, a curious world of Terra Mare, habitations built on pilings and protected by a vallum or defensive wall, which screen them from floods in a flat countryside where seasonal rains are violent. Their name, singular Terra Mara, comes from the word Terra Marna, or rich land, in the dialect of Emilia, and results from the considerable archaeological deposit that these dwellings left behind. These villages, whose dead were cremated, lasted until the early Iron Age. The society was peasant, and once again, its art was limited to the construction of dwellings and to the production and ornamentation of weapons and vases. Iron Age cultures. Iberia. Highly interesting artistic flowerings occurred in Spain at the end of the protohistoric era. First, in the southwest of the peninsula, near the Tower of Cadiz, there developed at the extreme end of the 2nd millennium BC a civilization still poorly understood that tradition attributes to the semi-historic, semi-legendary state of Tartessus. Archaeology has not yet revealed the splendor ascribed by the ancients to the Tartessian culture, which was strongly influenced by early Phoenician commercial contacts from the southern coast of Spain. Along the coasts of the Levant and penetrating deeply into the interior of the peninsula, an indigenous population, the Iberians, developed a truly original art under combined Grecian, Carthaginian, and Phoenician influences. Many Iberian dwelling sites have been discovered on the eastern coasts of Spain, where they were established on such high places as steep-sloped plateaus and protected by surrounding walls, with round and square towers and doors. The street network does not seem to follow a regular plan. Great temples, such as those of Castellar de Santisteban and Des Pinaperos in the Sierra Morena, have sacred storerooms where a great number, about 6,000 for the two sites, of votive statuettes have been discovered. Italy. The fate and art of the Etruscan people, who who made their appearance in the heart of Italy between the Arno and Tiber rivers around 700 BC and vanished under the legion's blows in the last centuries of the Roman Republic, must be mentioned here because in the early years of their existence they were deeply involved in Italic proto-history. In antiquity, the Etruscans were regarded as skillful architects and excellent builders. Precise ritual rules of town planning made it possible for them to construct cities on regular plans, the most beautiful remains of which are those in Marzabotto, near Bologna, and of Capua in Campania. Nothing much remains of the Tuscan cities, which were nevertheless very splendid. On the other hand, there remain thousands of tombs that reveal the structure of the vanished houses. The tomb was the dwelling of the dead and simulated the appearance of one or several rooms, constructed in bedrock and built of stone. Thus well protected, Etruscan grave goods and artistic creations were preserved. What little remains of Etruscan stonework has survived by virtue of its massiveness. Foundations of city walls survive at Volterra, Volsini, and Cortona, but those of Perugia are more complete and have surviving vaulted gates. The tombs, themselves replicas of house interiors, show something of moldings, arches, and vaults. True vaulting and arching were known, and these enabled buildings larger than those of Greece to be constructed. Wood was the chief building material for domestic purposes and for temples from which the terracotta decorations alone survive. Blocks of houses and carefully paved streets are known only from Marzabotto, although the layout of the tombs with paved streets in the Banditasia at Caere and the Cusamella at Vetulonia makes them veritable cities of the dead. The Latian hut urns show that houses of the Villanovan period, 8th century BC, were circular in plan with conical roofs, but a stone urn from Clusium is modeled in the form of a rectangular Etruscan house erected on a tall, steeped platform. The house is a hipped gable and has a gabled gallery over it. In this connection, it is interesting that the Romans attributed to the Etruscans the construction of the atrium house. Temples were rectangular in plan and divided into 3 cellae, chambers. Ground plans and nothing more are known from Rome and Bolsena. Etruscan temples, such as those of which remains survive at Bolsena and Orvieto, were built of wood and brick upon high platforms of dressed stone and were consequently more perishable than their Greek equivalents. They were crowned and decorated by brightly painted statues and revetments of terracotta, many of which have survived.